Hey everyone, thanks for joining today. We're going to get started in just a few minutes. Uh, so we'll just give others a chance to join, but thanks for being here. Hey everybody, we'll give it just maybe another minute and a half for others to join. Thanks for being here this afternoon. Okay, I think we're going to go ahead and get started, and maybe some more folks will trickle in. Thanks for joining us this afternoon. I know this topic might not be exciting, might be loaded with a lot of anxiety or fear, which is totally understandable. It's really the first time in 5 years that we have to talk about this, and so just want to acknowledge that up front that this is a loaded topic, and I'm grateful for all of you for being here on a Thursday afternoon to even just brave the topic with us. My name's Amy Salata. I'm the Outreach and Advocacy Manager at the Student Borrower Protection Center. I'm joined by my colleague Ella, who's on the back end doing some work for us as well on this webinar. So very grateful that she could be here too. The Student Borrower Protection Center is a national nonprofit policy organization focused solely on alleviating the burden of student debt across the country. We do this through a mixture of advocacy, policy making, and litigation to rein in industry abuses, protect borrowers' rights, and advance economic opportunity for the next generation of students. Just a couple notes at the top. As I mentioned, this is the first time in 5 years that we're really talking about default since the pandemic happened, since the on-ramp period where folks weren't really penalized for non-payment of loans for quite some time, and so collections are starting this summer. This is really like the first time we're thinking about this in a long time. So folks might be at very different steps in this process. Some folks on the call might be in delinquency, some folks might already be in default and facing collections. So I just want to make sure that I stated that at the top that, some of this information, I'll try to be very clear about like which part in the process you might be in. But just want to state that you might be at a different point in the process. And so we'll just kind of work through that as we go. Another thing is that we have a loaded agenda, but we also have plenty of time for questions. And so if you have questions during the course of this presentation, please put them in the Q&A feature at the bottom of your Zoom screen. We'll try to get to as many as possible at the end of this presentation. And we cannot give legal advice, but we find that most questions can be answered with general program information. And so just to note that if your question is hyper specific or, it's, related to like a screenshot of your student loans or something like that, we might not be able to answer very specifically, but we hope we can point you in the right direction at the very least. So with that, let's get started. So here's our agenda for today. We will be reviewing what delinquency and default are. We'll be going over how to check studentaid.gov, which is going to be your clearinghouse for a lot of information related to federal student loans. We'll talk about the options for folks in delinquency and then the options for folks who are trying to get out of default. We'll also review collections briefly at the end, and then we'll have time for your questions. And so I'll do my best to answer questions. If I don't know the answer, I will be very honest about that, and we can follow up in an email with the answers to your questions. So let's see how it goes. Let's take it away. So let's start with an overview of delinquency and default. So first, delinquency is when you don't make one payment on your student loan. So you have a monthly payment that's due and you miss one payment. That is when you are technically considered delinquent. You've missed the due date for one of your loans. Also, I wanted to state that we're going to be talking about federal student loans at this time. So this is loans that are held either directly by the federal government or held by, maybe a private lender, but guaranteed by the government. I can kind of explain what that means in a little bit, but we're only talking about federal loans here. We're not talking about defaulting on a private student loan, which is different. So if you have questions about that at the end, we can also talk about that a little bit, and I can point you in the direction of some resources on that front. So this is when delinquency occurs after you miss one payment, but they will begin reporting to credit bureaus after 90 days of missed payments. So after 3 months of missed payments, you'll start to see the effects on your credit report. It's easiest to help a borrower during this stage because you have a lot more options when you're in delinquency rather than when you're in default. When you're in default, other processes start and it's a little bit harder to kind of correct course. And so if this applies to you, if you're one of these people that maybe is between one missed payment and three missed payments, it's a great time to be looking at your options and trying to figure out what you can do to kind of get out of delinquency or get on track for your student loans. For folks in default technically occurs after 270 days of missed payments. So that is 9 months of missed payments. And again, just like stating that it's easiest to help folks before this happens. And so if you're kind of on this webinar before that 9 month mark, it's also a good time to be looking at your options. Just want to review the consequences of default at this point because there are a lot. And so if you're, trying to weigh your options right now because you're not yet in default, but you're in delinquency and you're trying to see like maybe just what the consequences of default might be, there are many. So, it hurts your credit. And so that affects whether or not you can get a house or a car or other types of credit. It makes those types of credit more expensive or, impossible to get at times. You can also be subject to collections activity. You can be sued through litigation. So, a servicer could sue you for the money that you owe to them. You could also be denied federal aid. And so, if you're looking to go back to school and you want to take out new loans to get a graduate degree or finish your bachelor's degree, you're unable to get that if you're in default. The collection costs also are up to 25%. I feel like this is a refrain that like, being poor is really expensive, but like, so that's certainly true right here that these collection costs can be quite onerous. The government can pursue borrowers forever, and they have extraordinary collection powers that include, taking your tax refund, administrative wage garnishment, so that they can take your wages out of your paycheck, and then offset some federal benefits like Social Security, other benefits that are not means tested. So, the consequences of default are real, and it takes a while to correct course, but we're glad you're here and like we're starting that conversation. So let's move on to checking studentaid.gov. So studentaid.gov is your clearinghouse for anything related to your federal student loans. You could log on right now while you're on this call and check studentaid.gov to see what's going on. So we're going to go through a few things on studentaid.gov that you can look out for. So when you get to studentaid.gov, you're going to log in. If you haven't logged in a while, it'll prompt you for a password. It'll send you a code to your email. This is the place to figure out if you have federal student loans or not. Once you log in, you will be able to visit your dashboard. Your dashboard will look something like this. It'll have the type of loans you have, the number of loans you have, and it'll say how much each of those loans currently, is in the balance. So if you're delinquent or default and you're not sure which category you're in, here is how you tell. So if you log into studentaid.gov and there's a banner at the top of your account, like this one to the right, you'll see that like you're in default. It'll say pretty clearly that your loans are in default. If you are in delinquency and you're not sure how long it's been, this will need to go through your servicer's website. So if you have a federal student loan, all of this information will be at studentaid.gov. But you will also have a servicer, and that is who you pay each month when you have monthly payments. So, examples of this is like Mohila, Nelnet, Ed Financial, all sorts of companies are kind of the contractors from that work with the federal government to collect on student loans. So if you're in delinquency, you'll need to go to your servicer site, which is a separate website. So you can find out your servicer at studentaid.gov to figure out which servicer you have. And then you want to visit that website and log into that website and see if you have any notifications from your servicer if you're delinquent. You should get notifications, if you're past due, like 90 days, 120 days, that might appear in your inbox in your servicer's website. So delinquencies will not appear on your studentaid.gov site, but they will appear on your servicer site. So that I know that this is all very complicated and convoluted. So happy to answer questions at the end. But that is how you would tell if you're in delinquency or in default. You can also download your aid data, which will give you a very granular report, which might help you. It might also be very confusing. And so I think that the dashboard is often the easiest way to kind of tell if you're in delinquency or default. But this will give you, like this download your aid data report will give you a much more detailed report on what's going on with your student loans and how many payments you've made, like that sort of thing. But it is a little hard to read. It's a text file, and so it's not a fun document to read, but it might be good to download that in case you do end up needing like legal advice or a financial advisor or something. They can look at that report and kind of tell what's been going on. The other thing I want to talk about while we're on this studentaid.gov kick is identifying what type of loans you have. So there's a lot of different loans out there in the federal student aid system. The main loan type has been direct loans. These are loans that are owned directly by the federal government, and they have been the main loan type since 2010. So if you took out a loan since 2010, it's likely already direct. If you have a loan that predates 2010, it could be one of these FFEL loans, which is a Federal Family Education Loan Program loan. Uh, Let me just go back to this slide here. So you can see that this person has two direct loans with balances. It says direct consolidation unsubsidized and direct consolidation subsidized. So these are direct loans because they say direct next to them. That's the only word you're looking for to figure this out. Does it say direct next to them? Then there are all these other loans that have $0 balances here at the bottom, like Perkins loans. And I think there were some FFEL loans maybe in one of these categories, like the 3 subsidized loans or unsubsidized loans. It'll say FFEL next to them, FFEL. The distinction is important because it comes into play later on. And so if you're on studentaid.gov and you're looking at your loans, you want to look for these words direct or FFEL in particular to figure out what steps you might need to take next. So I'll come back to this, but just wanted to flag this in case you're looking at your student loan dashboard right now and have questions about this. So yeah, let's come back to this. But this is one thing that I wanted to flag on studentaid.gov. So again, you'll see this here. So it'll say very clearly this is FFEL. These are from the text files that I mentioned. So downloading your aid data kind of yields a report that looks like this. I know it looks a little scary, but at the top it'll say very clearly that you have FFEL loans. That's the type of loan that you have. All right. Next, let's talk about some options for folks in delinquency. And thanks for your questions. I am not checking them right now, but we will get to them at the end. So just flagging that I see them coming in, and don't worry, we'll get time for them. So what can you do if you're in delinquency? Basically, there are three options for folks that are in delinquency. You can enroll in an income-driven repayment plan. You can try to get on a forbearance or a deferment, and these things are a little bit different, but operate very similarly. The forbearances and deferments. So we'll go over that too. But let's start with income-driven repayment plans. So when you have federal student loans, after you leave school, there's a 6 month grace period on your loans, and then at that point, you're automatically put into the standard repayment plan. This has you paying off the entire balance of your loan over 10 years. And so they can be, they can be very expensive, right? So if you have a lot of loans that you took out, you're paying that off over 10 years, your monthly payment is going to be a large amount. There are also some other loan repayment plans, like the extended repayment plan, which has you paying off the same amount over a longer period of time, over 25 years. So those payments might be a little bit more affordable. There's the graduated repayment plan, which has you starting out with very low payments and going up to very high payments over 10 years. We are going to spend the majority of our time talking about this bottom right-hand corner called income-driven repayment. These plans are often the most affordable for folks because they are tied to your monthly income and or your income, not tied to the balance of the loan itself. And so if you are unemployed or you have a very low income, you may be able to qualify for as low as a $0 monthly payment. And so in most cases, they're often the most affordable for folks. That doesn't always mean that they are affordable. We recognize that there are flaws to income-driven repayment plans, but they also have a lot of benefits, particularly if folks are lower income or yeah. So one of the other nice things about income-driven repayment plans is that after 20 or 25 years in repayment, you can get your remaining balance canceled after that time. So if you make payments for 20 or 25 years, depending on your situation and the plan that you're in, you can get the remainder of your balance canceled. It's also a 10-year forgiven timeline if you're seeking something called public service loan forgiveness. We're not going to be spending a lot of time on public service loan forgiveness today, but we have other webinars on public service loan forgiveness. We have some recordings on our YouTube channel. We can maybe send that out in a follow-up email on PSLF if that's something you're interested in down the line. But if you're in default, then and you're able to get out of default, that needs to happen first before you can kind of consider public service loan forgiveness. But essentially, that program is a 10-year program where you are working for a government or a nonprofit for 10 years, making payments on your student loans during that time, and you can get the remainder of your balance canceled after 10 years instead of 20 or 25 years. These income-driven repayment plans can be a bit distressing because if you're making a monthly payment of $0, or say it's $5 or $10, you're maybe not touching the interest on those plans or on that loan. And so it can be distressing to make payments, be doing everything right, but logging into your account to figure out, my balance is just kind of ballooning over time. And so that's why one of the really nice features is this cancellation after 20 or 25 years in repayment. There are 4 types of IDR plans. So there are currently 4. They are listed here at the bottom. ICR, IBR, Pay, and then Save. Save was a new plan that was announced in 2022. It has been held up in court for too long, over a year at this point. And so folks that were on the Save plan have been stuck in a forbearance during this time. Interest is going to start accruing on those plans starting tomorrow, which is really unfortunate and a political choice on the part of the Trump administration. But at any rate, these are the 4 plans that are available to folks right now, minus the Save plan, which is not currently available. And one thing to point out here is that ICR is only available for direct loan borrowers. So this is one point where whether or not you have a direct or a FFEL loan comes into play. And also the Pay plan is only available to direct loan borrowers. And so if you have FFEL loans, then the only option that you have at this moment in time would be an income-based repayment plan. Okay, so a lot of things are in flux right now. One other thing I want to mention is that these are the plans that are available to folks at this point in time. Folks who may have been following the reconciliation bill fights that were going on. There are changes being made to the student loan repayment system that will go into effect over time. So just want to flag that we have a great blog on that I think Ella can post in the chat for folks, and we can also share in an updated or in a follow-up email on like what exactly that looks like, what the changes are, when they'll go into effect. So just want to state that at this moment in time, these are the things available to folks, and this is definitely going to change because things have been changing pretty rapidly these days. Okay, so we talked about income-driven repayment as an option for folks in delinquency. Another option would be forbearances. So forbearances allow you to not make any monthly payments, but during this time, that time doesn't count towards cancellation programs. So remember, I stated that with income-driven repayment plans, you're making monthly payments and you're kind of working towards those cancellation thresholds of 20 or 25 years or 10 years if you're in PSLF. Forbearances do not count towards those cancellation thresholds. And they also, you continue to accrue interest on your loans during a forbearance. If you're interested uh, in a forbearance, you would need to call your servicer to ask for a forbearance. You can request one for different reasons, kind of listed here at the bottom. Um, and it's not possible to get them for more than 12 months at a time. So you can't, kind of be in, like, you can't request at the top of a call to be in forbearance for several years. You would need to do it every 12 months. This is again like decided by your loan servicer and not studentaid.gov. So, figuring out who your servicer is, calling your servicer, which I know is very frustrating at this moment in time that folks are being on hold for hours on end trying to get in touch with someone. But this is the way that you would try to get a forbearance through your servicer. Deferments are very similar to forbearances, except that loans do not accrue interest during the time that you're not making payments. And you need to ask for, a specific reason that you need to get a deferment. And so here are some reasons that you might be able to get a deferment. One very common one is, folks enrolled in school. So you could get an in-school deferment. Maybe you're going to school part-time, half-time, and you're not required to make payments during that time. In fact, if you are in school, your loans would be placed on in-school deferment automatically when you enter school, or if you're in the military service. So like, there's specific reasons why you could get a deferment for your student loans. And to do this, you again have to call your servicer, and they might ask you for documentation to verify the reason that you need a deferment. And so, they're very similar. They're like a little bit harder to get just because you might have to prove them, and then that interest doesn't accrue on a deferment. So these are the main options for folks that are in delinquency and not yet in default. Now let's move on to getting out of default if you're in default currently. All right, so folks who are getting out of default or who want to get out of default, there are two main options for these folks. The first one is to consolidate your loans. Consolidating your loans also takes place at studentaid.gov. This is a pretty simple process that takes about 30 minutes online. And basically, what you're doing when you consolidate your loans is you are taking out a new loan with the federal government and paying off your old loan uh, and just replacing it with that new loan that's owned directly by the federal government. You have a limited number of times to consolidate your loans, so this might not be an option that's available to everyone. Uh, you also cannot consolidate if you have a judgment. So if a student loan servicer or a student loan company sued you and maybe you didn't show up to court, you didn't know what was happening, you didn't get a notification, or you did show up to court and you lost, you could have a judgment in your name, from this student loan company that sued you. You can't consolidate if you have a judgment in your name. You also can't consolidate if you have an administrative wage garnishment order. This is, when the federal government takes money out of your paycheck each time you get paid. So if you're currently involved in administrative wage garnishment, like if you're already in that process, you also can't consolidate. You also can't consolidate if you already have a direct consolidation loan, unless you're putting it together with other loans. You're adding an additional federal loan into that mix to consolidate. So if you've already consolidated your loans once and you have one direct consolidation loan, you can't consolidate again to get out of default. So those are some of the limitations of consolidation. But it is a fairly easy process. Here are some screenshots. These might be like slightly outdated screenshots per se from consolidation, but it'll give you a general idea of where to go. So again, we're at studentaid.gov, find the place where you can consolidate your loans. And then it looks like this. It's a loan consolidation process. It's an application that you can start here at the bottom. And it'll have you run through all sorts of things. So it'll select all the loans that you want to consolidate. It'll show you the amount and interest rate for your new loan. It'll have you pick a servicer, and it'll have you kind of go over the terms of conditions and pick an income-driven repayment plan or a payment plan at the end. And so it's fairly easy. It doesn't take that long. And you know, if you're able to do it, it is a good option for folks that are in default. You also must apply for an income-driven repayment plan or make 3 consecutive payments. So these can be negotiated payments with your company that you can make. But really the easiest and kind of like most automated way to do this is to just apply for an income-driven repayment plan because then you'll be in that payment plan, and just kind of able to make those payments automatically. Income-driven repayment plans, one thing I didn't mention about them is that you need to certify your income every year so that the government knows how much money to take out of your account. And so, you'll apply for an income-driven repayment plan, you'll be on that plan for a year, and then when in a year's time, it'll ask you to certify your income, so that they know how much money to take from you. And here are those IDR plans again that are only available to certain folks, depending on your situation and like at this moment in time. Okay. The second option is rehabilitating your loans. You can only use this option one time. It's a bit more onerous of a process. Borrowers have to make 9 payments over a 10-month period, so already a bit more complicated. And it's 15% of your discretionary income. They can be a minimum of $5 a month as a payment, or a negotiated amount based on your expenses. And then after the rehabilitation is completed, your loan will be transferred to a servicer to be put on a payment plan. So this is the second option for folks that are looking to get out of default. There are some eligibility requirements on this front too. So you also cannot rehabilitate if you already have a judgment in your name against you. And you cannot rehabilitate if you already have rehabilitated in the past. Okay, so on the rehabilitation front, if this is an option that you're looking into, this is another point where what type of loans you have comes into play. So if you have direct loans, your loans are currently being held by the default resolution group. And so you would need to call them to rehabilitate. You can also visit this website here, myeddebt.ed.gov, to find out more information. So if you have direct loans, pay attention to the left hand of the screen. And if you have FFEL loans, you're going to need to contact your guarantee agency. This is also a bit tricky. There's a list of guarantee agencies here at this website. We can also share this out in a follow-up email, so don't feel like you need to. We'll share the slides, so don't feel like you need to jot this down right now. But you need to figure out who your guarantee agency is, and then request rehabilitation through them. And so these are two different, kind of processes that are similar. You just need to figure out which one you need to call depending on your situation if you have direct or FFEL loans. So two other options for folks to get out of default that technically exist. One is paying off the entirety of your loan balance. We recognize that that is not, an option for most folks, that most folks can't just pay off their, entire balance, if they're in default. Another option is negotiating a settlement. Negotiating a settlement, is likely not going to be like a situation where you can pay pennies on the dollar in that settlement. but you could be able to shave off a bit, of the entire balance, if you're looking to kind of negotiate a settlement if you're in default. You could also see if one of the cancellation programs applies to you. Often borrowers who qualify for closed school discharge and disability discharge are disproportionately in default. And so, checking out those two programs in particular to figure out if they might apply to you would also be a good option to consider. You also may be able to stop involuntary collection if that's, something that you're going through by raising defenses like identity theft or financial hardship. And so, turning over every stone here to kind of figure out like what you can do to get out of default is good. I also want to mention that for some folks, getting out of default might not be possible right now. If, particularly if your income isn't, going to change or your financial situation isn't going to change anytime soon, remember that you only have a limited number of options for these things. And so if you only can consolidate so many times, you can only rehabilitate once. And so, if you're in default right now and your situation isn't likely to change in the future, you could end up back in default after a period of time. And so, just thinking through that too, we recognize that that might not always be the best for folks at any given point in time. So those are the options for getting out of default. Let's just review collections very briefly, and then we can get to your questions. So as I mentioned, this is the first time in 5 years that we're really thinking about this. People were in the payment pause for federal student loans. Then there was an on-ramp period where that President Biden announced that if you weren't making payments on your loans, you weren't going to be facing some of the worst consequences of non-payment. So the Trump administration announced that they would resume collections this summer, and some of this has already started. So in May, they started seizing things like tax refunds and federal salary and benefits. They were supposed to start, seizing Social Security benefits, but they paused that for now. That was really because advocates really pushed back on this. Folks were saying, like, this is completely inhumane to take folks' Social Security benefits. And so that was, a huge win on the part of advocates. But they, have started this tax refund collection and federal salary and benefits and certain other benefits. They are expected to start wage garnishment very soon, sometime this summer. So we're really expecting that any day now. And so folks are really going to start feeling the consequences of default very soon, if they haven't already. So this could apply to you, right? You could already be in this situation where maybe you had your tax refund seized. And so just want to point out that, you could be at different stages of this, but this is where we are. So very briefly, how collections work is that you should receive a notice when the collections process begins. You have an opportunity to respond and prevent the collection, but it's only one written notice that's issued. And so if you miss that one written notice, you could be very confused as to why, these things are happening to you, particularly for tax seizures. I also want to just state that this is another point in time where, like, you could be at different points in this process. So, you should receive a notice prior to collections starting. If you are already in default and you have, this could start without you receiving a notice, like maybe you received a notice before at a period in time before, and it won't be like proactive, but like you already received this notice. And so, just want to state that like people again could be at different points in this process. And then an amount is taken. So 15% of federal benefits, 15% of discretionary income for wage garnishment and federal salary in particular, and then all of your tax refund could be taken. There are some like limited benefits to like or offset protections. So for Social Security benefits, they protect $750 a month or $9,000 a year. That's not a lot of money. So the government can only seize payments above this amount. And no more than 15% of the total benefit can be offset. So there are some protections, but granted, that is not a lot of money to be protected. social supplementary SSI income, or sorry, supplemental security income, or SSI, can be taken because it's a means tested benefit. So things like SNAP or TANF, like those things cannot be taken because they are protected because they are a means tested benefit. So anything that you're receiving on that front cannot be taken. You can appeal and contest these collections, but you have to act quickly. And you can appeal for reasons like financial hardship, disability, eligibility for loan discharge. So one of those programs I mentioned, like closed school or disability discharge. And so, that is something to look into if you think that you might qualify for one of those, or just, review the eligibility requirements for those programs to see if that's an option for you. You can also, get helped. I think like if you receive this collections notice, this is a great time to see if you qualify for legal aid, or you can get some financial coaching to walk you through this because it can take some time and be a bit difficult to navigate. Okay, I think that that is all on the presentation front, but would love to spend some time getting through your questions. And so let's see what we have here. Okay. So I might just like reiterate some of the ones that Ella already answered. Thank you, Ella, for looking at these questions while I was speaking. So yes, first we can definitely get you a copy of the slides. We can share a copy of the slides and a recording, and then some of the other resources that I mentioned on this call. And then there's some other ones as well that are like great kind of short videos on default that like if you're having trouble processing all this information because it's a lot of information, might be good to take it in shorter segments. Okay, let's see what other questions we had here. So yeah, Ella answered this question about the aid data report. What other information is included in that report? So she answered it perfectly. Like your loan type, your payment history, your balance, the number of qualifying payments you have towards programs like public service loan forgiveness. And so the aid data report, yeah, just has a very detailed kind of list of your federal student loans. It really is like a difficult thing to read, and so I think that that is most important if you are thinking that you might need a financial coach or to go to legal aid to help like have them help you kind of digest it.
And can I just jump in real quick? Amy, I was
Please.
looking at I just downloaded my own aid data report and was looking at it and was reminded that it includes like personal private information. So before you share it with any outside party, just like make sure you're okay that you take a look at it and it has your address and it has your contact information. Just, take a look at that before you share it, I would say.
Yeah, thank you, Ella. Um, we have another question about Perkins loans. Yes, Perkins loans are federal student loans, but I don't know if they get sent to the default resolution group or to a guarantee agency. So I'm wondering if maybe Ella, you could kind of ask that quickly of our staff and see if someone can respond, because I imagine that's what this question is getting at on the Perkins loans front. And if we can't get it to you on this call, then we will definitely email it after the event. Okay. We have a question about a joint consolidation loan in forbearance. This, I think, yeah, comes down to whether or not you're waiting for a loan separation and what type of forbearance it is. So, if you have more information there, that might be helpful to help us get you an answer. Do they have to get a judgment against you before they do a wage garnishment? This is a great question. So no, they don't have to do that. Yeah, Ella answered perfectly in the chat. Thanks, Ella, for getting to these questions.
Yeah. Someone else asked if you are able to share the slides after.
Yes, yes, we can share the slides. Absolutely. If someone has moved a lot, should they log into their account and update their address to be sure they get notices if in default? Yeah, I think it would be really good to keep your information updated at studentaid.gov for a number of reasons, just because there are so many notices that could come out and you might not get an email notification. There's all sorts of things. So yeah, I think keeping your information up to date at studentaid.gov is a great idea. Any tidbits on student loan bankruptcy? So this is sort of a loaded question and not quite the uh, topic of this presentation, but maybe we can send out some resources after the call on bankruptcy for student loans. How do we get on an income-driven repayment plan? You can do that a number of ways. You can do it at studentaid.gov by applying online, or you could also call your servicer, which is, loaded. I know that that's sort of a funny thing to be recommending when the wait times are horrendous and there's a lot of mismanagement. So, you can do it online on studentaid.gov or with your servicer by calling them. Okay.
I'm not sure if you also saw or already answered, Amy, the question, is there any downside to updating your address if you are in default?
I'm not sure. I think we should pose that to the staff as well, and so we can either get you an answer afterwards, or if someone is able to respond on our staff very quickly, maybe we can find that out on this call.
Sure.
Okay, I'm just reading some new questions that are coming in. Okay, we're getting a question about the save forbearance. So if you were on the save forbearance, should you actively switch to another plan or does it change automatically? So, President Trump announced that interest is going to start accruing on these loans in the save forbearance starting tomorrow. And so it will not change automatically as of yet. I believe that folks are stuck in the safe forbearance until the end of the year. Is that right, Ella? Or is it September? I think it's the end of the year. And so if you're in the safe forbearance and say that you want to start making payments so that you can start accruing time towards IDR cancellation or public service loan forgiveness, then you could switch out of save to start making payments and accrue time towards those cancellation plans. I think that would be like one of the reasons that that might be beneficial, especially since interest is going to start accruing as of tomorrow. And so, of course, like, you're not required to make payments on the save forbearance right now, but the downside is then that you can accrue time towards these cancellation programs. If you don't really care about the cancellation programs or you're not really on track for that or haven't been, that's not like an option that's kind of in your mind at the moment, then maybe it does make sense to not make payments for the time that you have while you can be on forbearance um, without making payments. And so like it really comes down to like, can you make payments right now and accrue time towards cancellation programs, or is that not really an option? And maybe um, you should remain on this safe forbearance. So it really comes down to like what your finances look like right now and what they'll look like in the next few months. Um, we're getting a question about SPPC offering one-on-one sessions to help borrowers. We don't do one-on-one sessions to help borrowers, unfortunately, but we can share a list out of folks that are in legal aid. I think we have some resources on financial counseling in your city. You might be able to get it through your city. A lot of cities offer free or low cost financial coaching or financial counseling. And so, yeah, we can definitely share that list out afterwards.
Also, apologies. I was going to type an answer and then I accidentally clicked answer live. So I will just answer to the real quick. The question, uh,
Sure.
if you start the rehabilitation process, does that make it less likely that they will take collections, garnishment, or judgment action? Um, to my knowledge, judgment actions are really only for private student loans. That's how they force you to that's how they force collections, right? So if you're making payments on the rehabilitation path, um, they're not going to collect on you because you're making voluntary payments, right? So hopefully that answers that.
Thank you, Ella. Okay, I'm just rereading some of these questions here.
And we got an answer on the previous question. For Perkins loans, when they default, you will most likely hear from the default resolution group because the education department no longer contracts private collection agencies.
Thank you, Ella. That's great. Okay. Just trying to keep up here.
Mhm.
Okay, we've got a question about IDR here again. If you're already on IDR, you're already on an income-driven repayment plan, and you're very close to the PSLF timeline, but your payment amount is very low from the COVID pauses. Should you look into increasing your IDR payment or just leave it as is? Wondering if a low IDR payment would send you into delinquency or default. This is a great question. I've never gotten this question before. So being on a low IDR payment will not affect your chances at getting PSLF or IDR cancellation. This is how it's set up. And so if you qualify for a $0 monthly IDR plan or a $5 monthly IDR plan, you just need to make that payment each month in order to accrue that time towards public service loan forgiveness or towards IDR cancellation. Um, and you know will need to recertify your income every year, but if you're already close, then it's possible that you wouldn't need to recertify before you received PSLF. And so yeah, the amount that you're paying each month does not affect like your ability to get cancellation, or it won't send you into delinquency or default. You just need to make that payment that is listed as your monthly payment on your servicer's website or on studentaid.gov. uh Yeah, I think the crux of this question for me really hinges on whether or not, like, when you need to recertify your income. So just paying attention to when you get that notice from your servicer that says it's time to recertify your income because you're on an income-driven repayment plan. And so that is something that I would be cognizant of moving forward.
Also, I can provide an answer, sorry to interrupt, for the question, is there any downside to updating your address if you are in default? So, we did a little crowdsourcing for this, but really the only downside it seems is that you're getting the collection notices, which can be annoying, but it's better than not getting them because either way, they're either going to send them to your past address and you're not going to see them and not going to be aware. But regardless, like the status is the same, right? So it seems like maybe the only downside is that you'll be annoyed at receiving collection notices, but overall seems better to see them than not see them. But that's really up to you.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Okay, we have a question about IDR and explaining how they calculate your discretionary income. I don't have these slides in front of me, but essentially all of the IDR plans calculate your discretionary income differently. And so the studentaid.gov repayment tool is an option to look at if you want to find out what a ballpark number might be on your monthly student loan payment. But this person also admitted that like it might not be totally correct, and so there have been a lot of issues with the student loan repayment tool, and so just want to flag that up front. But I think we can share out resources on how they calculate discretionary income for different plans. We have some slides on that we can share. So I will include that in the follow-up email as well.
Also dropped the page from studentaid.gov that explains. I dropped a link in response to that question that explains how they calculate discretionary income.
Thank you so much. Okay, I'm just looking through this. We're getting one more question about If your servicer has not asked you to recertify your income in a few years, should I look into that? So during the pandemic, folks weren't, there was the payment pause that lasted 2.5 years or so. And so, folks weren't required to recertify their income during that time. And then they kind of kept pushing this back because of the on-ramp period. And so folks have gone, a number of years where they haven't had to recertify their income. I believe that timeline has been moved and there is an answer to this question. Hold on, I'm just waiting 1 second for someone to respond on our staff. But essentially, like folks haven't been recertifying, you haven't had to recertify your income because of the payment pause and because of the on-ramp period. And so now we're just waiting on exactly when that has been extended to. I know they kept pushing it back and I couldn't keep track of exactly when it has been extended to.
So if you haven't heard from them, it also just might be worth looking into like making sure that they have your correct contact information as well, just if
Yeah.
they're trying to troubleshoot. But um and sorry, I don't want to jump between questions too much, Amy. I can take a stab at answering another one while we're waiting. If
Sure, that would be great.
So the question says, currently in default since January 2025, I heard consolidating loans may eliminate options in other cancellation categories, for example, years working in schools. Also, government direct switch servicer, and they moved my 2 loans to 7 loans. Is this legal? I've called the credit bureau, but servicer is telling them this is legit. So, I mean, most of this sounds like a really specific, particular situation that I would need to like it seems like it's specific to you and we would need more information to kind of untangle what's happening here. But the beginning part of your question seems to be about like weighing the options of like what happens when you consolidate and does that mean that you're losing out on like pursuing PSLF or something like that. And that is also like a very personal decision and we cannot give you legal advice about how to like move forward with your loans one way or another, but consolidating is one good option for getting out of default if you're able to consolidate your loan. Um, you can only do that once, right? So it might be something to consider. But again, that's like a personal decision for you, and we can't tell you which way to move forward with your loans there. However, I'm sure, as Amy's been saying, we will send out resources after this. And maybe it's worth, reaching out to pursuing like legal aid. I'm not, again, the latter part of your question is we would need more information on that.
Yeah, I think that's right. Yeah, on the latter part about the 2 to 7 loans. And so yeah, I think like looking into legal aid or financial coaching might be the most helpful so that they can kind of download your A data and figure out what is going on. Okay. I think that just one final question here I'm seeing on the PSLF buyback program. So the PSLF buyback program is a program where if you have spent some time in deferments or forbearances and you like want to buy back that time essentially, um, basically you can make a payment or make payments that would get you public service loan forgiveness. So, the remainder of your balance canceled. If you already have had 120 months of qualifying employment with a government agency or a nonprofit. This program is, we've heard of a few cases of folks getting it. It is, they don't really have an amazing process set up for it as I understand it. And so I think the cases that have gone through are very ad hoc and dependent on the people that have been working those cases. And so I guess all to say that it's not a perfect program. And, given that the federal government has just uh, suffered so many reductions in force and layoffs, is their staff to really kind of run into those or like process those PSLF buybacks is a question I think that's outstanding. And so it's not impossible to get the PSLF buyback, but essentially it works that if you already are over the 120 mark of qualifying employment, and you want to buy back some of the time that you didn't spend making payments, you can do that. But as far as I understand it, it's definitely not a perfect program or one that is, currently functioning super well. So I think that maybe that is like the short answer to the PSLF buyback question. Okay, I think that those are all the questions that we have right now. Thanks everyone for being on this call. I want to take a minute. We have a very, very short survey that is exactly 3 questions long, one of which is just a checkbox for feedback. So if you could fill that out, Ella's going to throw it in the chat to everyone.
It's looking like it's only letting me send, it's not letting me send to everyone, so I can do, oh great, I can send it to everyone as a response to a question, if that's okay. If folks,
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I don't know why that's weird.
yeah.
Actually, I wonder if I can do it. I think that might have worked. So maybe if you have 5 seconds to fill out this survey, again, this is the first time we're doing this in 5 years. We're going to have another webinar coming up in September. And so if you know folks that are facing delinquency and default and need some information, this is a great place to send them. And if you have feedback on how this went, we'd love to hear it because this is our first one. I'm sure the first of many. I know this is a stressful topic, so thanks for being here. And I hope you have a great weekend. We'll be sharing out the recording, some slides, and some other resources, based on all the questions that you asked during this call. And thanks, Ella, for being here. Thanks, everyone, for coming, and have a great weekend.